So it's important from the energy, I'll get into um, the rehab reasons, but even as a preventative, I mean, running occurs in like a linear sagittal plane. We're going forward, we're propulsing, we're using the hamstrings, the hip extensors, essentially the glutes, and you're running in a linear motion. The calves, the plantar fascia develop the spring to propulse yourself forward. But there's also a rotational component that to complement it and to keep you strong for when you do these long runs, especially as a beginner and you start to fatigue the muscles out by the end of the run, I like to use cross training preventatively as well as to just let's work in the rotational, the transverse plane. Let's do some lateral hop training. Let's do some rollerblading, just other things if they're already a blade, rollerblade or something like that. Like let's work other planes of the hip, which is typically where I find some weaknesses in single leg squats and stuff like that. So cross training is important because it allows you to keep up your activity and your cardiovascular levels while you're recovering from an injury, but also as a preventative measure to not only train different planes, but also to keep you like mentally fresh as well. So sometimes you get into this slog with running training as it takes a long time to run a marathon. You usually leave yourself enough time to run one. It provides kind of a mental break as well as training different planes and keeping you strong in different areas as well. So
Yeah.
prevent yeah, so again, running is yeah, top area. We use things called to measure intensity, we use things called metabolic equivalence of task. It's like a scale of 1 to 20 plus ish of your body's ability to perceive, and it's your intensity and how easy it is your body to consume oxygen, basically. And like 1 met is me just sitting here resting, and
Hmm.
8 mets is me shoveling snow. And so things like running at like let's say a 10-minute pace. It's about 9.5 to 10 mets. Running at a 10-mile pace, 14.5 mets. So things like that get close to that would be cycling, biking. You can get up there. You can get to pretty high VO2 max challenge. Over 90% you can get to of your VO2 max, and then that's like about 14, 15 mets. So you can get pretty high for a comparison, right? Of course, the more you're running on
Hmm.
a hill and the faster you're running, the higher your met. Like straight sprinting up a hill would be like 20 mets. So if I can get really close, which you can only sustain for a little bit, with biking or elliptical training, you can get pretty high. You can get between like 12 and 15 mets on an elliptical. I think elliptical would be the same situation. You're just moving down the road with it. So the short answer is no. Slow jogging would not take the place of a dynamic warm-up. It's actually inferior to a dynamic warm-up in the research and few articles, which is cool. So the dynamic warm up, you want to prepare specifically things like the Achilles tendon, things that get stiff and are prone in plyometric activity to either rupture, tear, or be injured essentially, or develop a tendinopathy. You want spring with running. You want spring, mobility. You want the joints to be all checked in, as I say, before you go off and run. You want to check the engine light of all the joints because there's something to be said about even just doing like ankle rolling and things and three-way hip lunging to just warm up that joint. There's a lot of proprioception in that joint. You're bathing it in synovial fluid, you're getting it ready, you're communicating up and down to the brain, to the joint that we're ready to go, that this muscle is warm. You're decreasing your stretching time by specifically talking to each joint. And so I always pick the dynamic workout. You could do a little bit of static stretching, but I would save it for the end. There is an ideal warm-up time, and that's about 10 to 15 minutes. Because if I am testing someone's flexibility in like an exercise science lab, I warm up that person for 15 minutes before I do that. So I get everything warm, I get all the joints going. So the answer is the slow jog is not enough. You're just doing a linear plane, you're not priming things, you're not doing a check-in, so you really don't know if yeah, your hip was felt a little tighter that day or something was not quite right with the ankle before you went. Because if you gave yourself that 15 minutes, you can check in with each joint, so to speak. So I would say yes, I recommend a workout, a dynamic warm up. There isn't an exact order, but I typically start with ankle, then calf, like with some dynamic calf raises in different planes of the foot. And then I go into my three-way hip lunge. So it's amazing what that can do, just like 10 of each direction even. You just feel really warm, you feel ready to go. You're like, okay, that right's a little tight, so I might do a few Spider-Man lunges first. And then I slowly build it into something that would be akin to like bounding and A skips, B skips, C skips, stuff like that at the end. I butt kicks, things like that. I do that at like the last bit of the warm up and then I'm ready to go, essentially. I tend to start with biking, but yes, because biking I can just handle a lot, and especially if they have a Peloton bike. But if they're uninjured and they're starting preventative, this is when technically the supplemental strength training comes in. So I definitely reserve some days a week for that, usually two, I would say, usually two. And then I try to give them something, again, that's fun to them. So what's fun and what moves you in a different plane, as I said before, than the linear, like what's
Hmm.
or what's going to stabilize that funky right glute, what's going to power you through this and keep you fresh. And usually patients will pick like a sport that they do, like soccer or rollerblading or something like that. And then I try to say, okay, let's just check in with this and do like 1 day a week of cross training with that particular endurance exercise. And then you can make like something called like a fartlek out of it. You can make it an intense interval of like rollerblading really fast and then going slow and then rollerblading really fast and just keeping it fresh and fun and variable essentially so they don't get bored. If it's complete beginner, like couch to marathon, which is rare, it's usually someone that's run a few distances, that's like 24 weeks. You give them a 6 month period to get to that point. I'm serious, like I'm more on the slow train. 16 weeks for someone that's run before, blah, 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 wants to do it right. And the reason why is because Oh, well, let me get into that in a second. So this is the weekly structure. So that's your overall plan, 16 to 24 weeks, depending on your level. And then 3 times a week are those zone two trainings. So you're doing aerobic, you're speaking to a certain energy system, a metabolic system, the oxidative system, and you're working in like a zone one, two. You can hold a conversation. You're building a volume. You're building an aerobic base. It's like 80% of your training is going to be building that volume. So that's 3 times a week you're doing those runs. And then 1 to 2 days a week of those intensity things like like intervals and fartleks and tempo runs where you're trying to get into that 80 to 90% max heart rate several times throughout that run to improve your lactate threshold and improve your speed and work that anaerobic system because you want all the benefits of the cardiovascular training and you want to run your race quite well. And then, so you're not doing too much of that. You're doing like 1 to 2 days. And then you're doing 1 to 2 days of cross training or supplemental strength training. I kind of group them together there. And then 1 to 2 days of rest. You want at least one rest day, in my opinion. That a rest day means like foam rolling, yoga, stretching, stuff like that, breath work, meditating, other things like that. And of course, we can get, I'll save that for you, but like the sleep and the diet considerations too. We want to look at all that. The
Yeah.
reason you do that is because the thing is like I see these Googleable plans that just pop up like you can do 3 months to your marathon, so to speak, and you'll see a lot of cool cardiovascular benefits in 12 weeks, but the tissue doesn't catch up. So tendons and bones are dense connective tissue. They go through a lot of remodeling through the load that you provide when you're running, when you're pounding the pavement. And that stuff starts to really come out at like past 12 weeks into 16 weeks. So you don't really want to rush and cram because you want to give the type 1 collagen a chance to line down in parallel, to generate force, to catch up to the cardiovascular demands. Because you'll feel like I can run, I can fly now, I'm doing better. But it's the tendons and the bones that have to catch up in their healing and remodeling process. And that's why you want to give yourself 4 to 6 months to train because that stuff doesn't really get strong. You need to like segmentally load it and give it enough rest to get strong and remodel. It's a ongoing process until like 12 to 16 weeks. So you want to leave plenty of time.